Well, it's good to be back. I love this church. I love Pastor Barry, good friend, good mentor. Love this church for what you all are doing here in Texas, around the country, and around the world. Your impact is global, which is just amazing. And so God bless you guys. It's good to be here. If you showed up to work this week, and just go on this little imagination trip with me. You go on to work this week, and the boss says, hey, I need to talk to you after work, and you go, oh no. But he pulls you in the office after work, and he hands you a check, and he says, hey, you've been doing so well, I want to give you a bonus. And he hands you a check for, how do you like me so far? I've already gotten you a bonus. Isn't this amazing? All right, so he hands you a check for $233,000, okay? Wow. Now, if you're like me, that's a game changer for me. If I take that home and if I invest that well, like that's gonna change my life. But here's the thing: if I'm going to invest that money, you better know I'm going to want to know everything there is to know about the company that I'm going to invest in. I want to know the leadership of that company. I want to know the 3-year trends of that company. I want to know the sector, the area, the industry that company is in. I want to know everything there is to know. I want to be intentional about how to invest that kind of money. Well, a couple of years ago, there was an article in the U.S. News and World Report called "The Real Cost of Raising Kids." And it said when you add up all the expenses of having a child, the average total cost comes to $233,000. Everybody go, whoa. Now get this, if you have a daughter, it's 18% more. Ain't that good? You'd be like, that's right, I told you. So here's the thing, with the same intentionality that I'm going to invest that money in a company, certainly, I would want, I'm going to take that same level of intentionality and try to figure out if I'm going to invest that much money in a child, in a life, well, then I want to know everything there is about how to invest that money into a child. God, show me. What do I need to do? Now, it's not just money, though, is it? I mean, honestly, time. I have an app on my phone. It's called Orange, and you can put in the dates, the birth date of each of your kids, and it will tell you when they will graduate, and then it gives you a countdown clock. So that, which I guess for some people it's kind of like, come on, Lord, But for me, it's like you're looking at that thing going, oh my goodness, with Grace, she's 17. I only have this many months. It'll show you how many months you have, how many weeks, how many days you have before your child graduates. And I'm thinking, man, if I'm going to put that, I want to be as intentional as I can possibly be with the money or with the time that I have. I keep talking about my kids. Here they are, by the way. This is my family. Oh, that's my wife, Rachel. And yes. That's awesome. And then that's Grace. Grace is 17. That's Luke. He is 15. And then Joe, little Joe, he's 11 years old. Now, those two, that means I've got 2 teenagers. How many of you have teenagers? Yes. Out back, we're going to have, after the service, we're going to have a prayer and support group for all of us to get together. But here's the thing. I want to do the very best I can to invest the time that I have, to take the investment of my life and invest it in those 3. Now, what you didn't see up there, because the foster care system won't let us show pictures in public, is that a month ago we just took on an 11-year-old Alex and a 9-year-old Kenny, and we got these 2 little whippersnappers running around. And how many of you know that with 5 ankle biters in my house, I am trying to figure out this whole parenting thing. Like, I am thinking about this a lot. So I've been studying, and I look at Hebrews 11, and in Hebrews 11, it actually, some people call it the Hall of Faith. Like not the Hall of Fame, but the Hall of Faith. Because they've got the giants of the faith are in Hebrews 11. And it has Abraham and Moses and Jacob and Samson in there. And so what I've been doing is just kind of looking at some of these great heroes of the faith, because here's what I have found. As I've grown up, and I grew up in church, but as I grew up, I was thinking, man, I want to be a hero of the faith. Wouldn't that be great? I want to be a giant of the faith. But you know what? Even more, as you have kids, Like, don't you want, like, I want to be a hero maker. Like, I want to raise giants of the faith. Are you with me on this? Like, I want to raise them up, get them all pumped up for Jesus, get them excited about his values, what he loves, the things that he hates, I want them to hate. The things that he loves, I want them to love. And then I want to just throw them out into an unsuspecting world and watch them change the world. Are you excited about that? Man, so if you're a parent here today, or if you're a grandparent here today, or, and this is what I'm learning from the foster care system, like, hey, you never, like, it takes a village. Or better said, it takes a church to raise children. And so you might have a cousin, or you might have a grandkid, or you might, like any of us here. And I will say this, this will apply to everybody. But also, there are going to be lessons along the way that really God will use to speak to us, even not about kids. So be on the lookout for that as well. Well, here's the thing. If you want to raise giants of the faith, I'm going to look at Samson. And if you want to turn with me there, we're going to be at Judges 13. If not, we'll put it up on the screen. But in Judges 13, it was interesting. If I'm trying to figure out a giant of the faith, the first thing that it says is the birth of Samson. And sure enough, it talks first about his parents. And so, man, I took out my magnifying glass and I started reading through this. And look what it says. It says, a certain man of Zorah named Manoah, that's his father, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite dedicated to God from the womb. So here's the thing. Samson's parents raised him with a certain set of boundaries. It was a Nazirite vow. It said you're not supposed to give them fruit of the vine, you're not supposed to cut their hair, and they're not supposed to touch dead animals, dead bodies. And the point is not that we would adopt those cultural boundaries for us. The point is that we would understand that what we need to do is give kids boundaries. There's a discipline, boundaries, disciplines. There's a true story that comes out of the social sciences, and it said that one time they built a school, and when they built the school, they had so much land that outside the school was going to be the playground, but it was so big that they didn't even feel like they needed a fence around the playground before they got to the busy street. And so they let these kids out there and run, and what they noticed is that as the kids went out the first day on that playground, they were kind of sheepish. They fought a little bit more than what they did. They were always, kind of tugging on the teacher's hem there and saying, hey, it's just not right. They were just noticing that the kids did not feel great about this thing. So you know what they did to solve the problem? They put up a fence. They put up just a chain link, waist-high fence. Then they put the kids out there, and they noticed the kids were playing like crazy. They were running around with a greater sense of security and a greater sense of freedom, and it just made all the difference. And they concluded that the difference was that fence. The kids had a boundary. Now, if you'd asked those kids, this is what I observed. You ask those kids, hey, we're going to build you a playground. What do you want in it? Would any kid have said, oh, we got to have a boundary? No. Just like if you ask your kids today, hey, you know what, came from church and realized that what you guys really want is boundaries, your kids are going to go, no way, but that is what they want. They might not know it, but that boundaries, the discipline, the fence post to be able to say, hey, this is out of bounds and this is out of bounds, that gives them direction and security. They're able to expect, they understand what mom and dad expect. They want boundaries. They want discipline. Now, the hard part is it's so hard to discipline little kids. Are you with me on this? They're just so cute. My son's 15. He was 4 years old, probably 3.5 years old. And we were setting up and tearing down our church. We started the church 12 years ago. We had to actually set it up and tear it down. So we're setting up chairs. Sunday morning was chaotic because all these volunteers would show up, and we had to get this thing set up before all the rest of the church came. And we're trying to make all this happen. Well, my 3.5-year-old boy is running around getting in everybody's way. And so I pull him aside. I said, buddy, you can't do this. We got to plug in these microphones and set up these chairs, and you're getting in everybody's way. You may not run. He said, okay, Daddy, So I go back to doing, setting things up, and that peripheral vision, I just see this flash, And of course, sure, it's Luke, and so I pull him aside, a little bit more stern now, and I say, buddy, were you running? And he said, honestly, he looks at me, and he says, Daddy, I don't know. I wasn't watching my feet. So how are you supposed to discipline that? Right? So I looked at the Bible, and I just went ahead and got a cat of 9 tails and whipped him 40 times minus 1. No, I'm just kidding. Listen, if you refuse to discipline your son, it proves you don't love him. It says in Proverbs 13:24. Living Bible says that. What did I do with Luke? I don't know. I gave him a timeout or something. But you understand that these little, maybe white lies or fibs that they tell as little kids, and we think, oh, well, all kids do that. And then they get into middle school or high school, and they lie about when they're going to come home or where they were, and you go, well, all high schoolers deal with that. We just kind of let it go. And next thing you know, they're getting fired from their job because they can't be trusted when the boss is away from the office. Or they're getting a divorce because their spouse can't trust them. You see, what it says in Proverbs 19:18 says, correct your children while there is still hope. Do not let them destroy themselves. And so I would say to you, if we want to raise giants of the faith, we need to give these kids boundaries. Here's another one. Yeah, God's good. Here's another one. It says this, when the angel came down and told these parents about Samson, it says that he would be dedicated to God from the womb. And then it says he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. If you know the history, the Philistines are oppressing the Israelites, God's people. And so mom and dad hear from an angel that your son is going to lead God's people against the Philistines. How many of you would have stuck your chest out a little bit more, would have walked around being a little proud of your son, knowing that that was God's purpose on his life? Now, we don't know that the angel came and ever told Samson what his purpose was. My assumption is that mom and dad were entrusted with that communication. And as mom and dad are raising Samson, they're saying, hey, buddy, you got a big purpose on your life. You've got a high calling. God's going to use you to lead our people. Every time he saw some Philistine oppressing some Israelite, they're pulling Samson aside and going, buddy, you're going to stop that. You're going to make that right. You're going to bring justice to that. You have a high purpose on your life. How many of you know that having a high calling on your life, a real purpose in your life, makes all the difference? That, man, it doesn't really matter what you do for a living, that if you're walking into it with a high calling and a grand vision and a divine purpose, well, that makes all the difference. Now, it's hard sometimes. If I asked you, hey, man, list some of the jobs, maybe the top 5 jobs that you think would be hard to get up every day and sort of walk to work being excited about your job, I bet at least one person in here would say, garbage man. I mean, would you agree in Texas when it gets really hot, slinging garbage could be pretty tough job? I don't know too many garbage men that get up every day and go, man, I've got a high calling, a divine purpose on my life. But I know one, at least one. I know one. Because it was a dead of winter in Chicago, middle of January. I had drawn the short straw to take the garbage out from my college roommates and dump it in the garbage. And I guess I wasn't real happy about it because I think my face must have looked kind of grumpy, because as I'm getting ready to dump this thing in, here comes the garbage truck. It opens up, and this guy bounds out of the garbage truck with a big old smile on his face, and he hands me this piece of paper. And when he does it, I guess he looked at my face and he said, hey, having a trashy day? No lie. And I look at this thing, and he's written down Bible verses. And I get to talking to him, and sure enough, he goes, Dave, of course, I'm studying for ministry at the time. He's looking at me going, man, if you got the joy of the Lord in your heart, you better let your face know, because you look, anyway. But I get to talking to him, and he goes, Dave, I basically get up every morning and I pray that God, when I go out on my route, use me like a missionary. Find me divine appointments where I can encourage people, where I can pray for people, where I can, Dave, I've even led people to the Lord on my garbage route. I'm going, it's amazing. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, Dave, you need to understand, I'm not a garbage man who just happens to be a Christian. I'm a Christian who just happens to be a garbage man. And I went, oh, so good. That's so good. And I think as I look out at this crowd, I think it might work with some other jobs as well. I think that if you're a banker, you might not just be a banker who happens to go to church. It could be that you're a passionate follower of Jesus who just happens to work in finance. Or you're not just a teacher who just happens to own a Bible, but you're a follower of Jesus. You are a missionary of God whose mission field just happens to be the educational system. Are you with me? Because I'm thinking as I'm going through this, I think it works with every job. Construction worker and CEO, just about every homemaker, whatever it is. And guys, if we will model that, then do you know that our kids will look up at us and go, maybe the most important thing in the world is not just to work for the weekends, raise a couple kids, take them to soccer, but it is to be on mission for God. And I tell you what, maybe our kids will begin to adopt a high calling, a divine purpose in their lives as well. I told you we got these foster kids. They've never had a man in the home. They're so timid and they're scared. They just walk around scared. And we've been praying for them for the last four weeks, and I've just been praying, God, show these young men the divine purpose in their life. Show them, God, what you want them to do. And you know what? And show them how you're going to use them. You know what word I never use in that prayer? If. I never say, God, if you could use somebody like this. No, it's God. Show these guys how you want to use them. And do you know what? They're starting to walk around with a little more confidence. Praise God. All right, that's purpose. Challenges. Read on to Judges 14. We don't have time to read it right now, but go home, read Judges 14. And what you're going to find is that Samson is now a young man. And he and his parents are headed down to a city called Timnah. And on his way down, it says that a lion jumps out and Samson kills the lion. And then something very interesting, right after that, it says he didn't tell his parents. Like his parents didn't know. And so as I'm reading that, I'm going, okay, so his parents are with him, but not hovering over him to the point that, that they're keeping him from every tough challenge. They've given him enough space to encounter a significant challenge in his life. Now, how many of you know kids these days are the safest they have ever been? Come on. My mother never in her life used an antibacterial wipe on me, okay? She never did. Do you know if my face got dirty or something got dirty, you want to know what my mom used? You're right. And I'm with as hard as she would rub on my face, I think she was trying to rub the sin out of my life too, because I'm telling you, she could clean anything with that. It's crazy. She'd never use an antibacterial wipe. We're so afraid of everything. You know what? We put our 9-year-old kids now in a car seat with like a 6-point harness on it. Like they're going to go upside down in a corkscrew or something. It's crazy, like a roller coaster. Do you know where I sat in the car growing up? In the front seat, right? And there were no airbags, and the dash was made out of what? Metal, right? Or if I didn't sit in the front seat, do you know where I would sit? If Dad and Mom were in the front seat and we're on a trip, guess where I would sit? I'm in the back, okay? But there's the window that comes down in the back, and there's like that ledge up there where the speakers are. Did anybody else used to crawl up into that death trap right up there? Yeah. I survived. You survived. We made it. Bike helmets. Come on. In my neighborhood, if some kid rolled up in a bike helmet, They're going to be playing in the sandbox by themselves. That's all I'm saying, all right? We just didn't do it. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you ought to keep your kids safe. That is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying all of that safety, I think, has come from this mindset, this culture that we say we've got to keep our kids from every challenge, from everything that might hurt them, from everything that might be hard in their lives. So that, you know, if they're having a hard time in science, or like we'll do their science homework for them because heaven forbid they get a B- on something. And it hurts their little self-esteem for a little while or something. Or if they don't make the ball team, well, I'm marching right into that coach and I'm saying, hey, you need to give him a spot on this team because he can't handle it or if a kid gets a little bit of teasing on the playground, we're walking right into the principal and saying, you got to make sure. Now listen, I'm not saying you shouldn't be involved. I'm just saying that our attitude toward challenges ought to be a little more like God's attitude toward challenges. Now watch what I mean by that. God says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Joy? Why? Because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. God knows that growth can come from facing challenges. If I asked you right now to think about the time in your life where you grew the most, either in your faith or in maturity, I said, you know what, tell me about the time where you just really grew as a person. I guarantee the largest majority of the people in here, it would be during or right after a time of great challenge in your life, almost to the point that you can look back on it now and consider it pure joy that you went through it. Guys, when we take responsibility from someone, when we take responsibility for someone, we take responsibility from someone. H. Stephen Glenn is one of the foremost authorities on kids and self-esteem. He says that one of the main problems our kids face, especially teenagers, is that they know they're totally unnecessary when it comes to the running of the households they live in. He says we rarely give significant responsibility, and so they become self-absorbed and irresponsible. He says we tell them we just want them to be happy and enjoy life, and then we turn around and criticize them for being irresponsible and selfish. Guys, if you want to raise giants of the faith, then let them experience some challenges. Now I got to balance that a little bit. Because in Judges 14, you'll notice that his parents were not hovering over him, but they were there. They were on the trip. They were involved. And interesting, if you read the passage, Samson is actually going down to Timnah to find a wife. And so here he is as an adult young man and inviting his parents to be a part of the search process for his spouse. So they had the kind of relationship where they weren't hovering over everything that he did, but they weren't just leaving him to his own devices. They were involved in his life. So I'm reading through that and I'm trying to figure out, okay, so how would you narrow that down and say that, like, what kids need? And I'm studying this week. I'm working on my computer, and Luke walks in. He says, Dad, let's go shoot some hoops. I said, I can't, buddy. I'm trying to figure out what kids need. And no lie, my daughter comes in like 5 minutes later, and she's like, Dad, come hear this new song I'm playing on the piano. And I'm like, I can't. I'm trying to figure out what kid. I'm honest to goodness, this happened to me this week. And then my little son, 11 years old, he just comes in and didn't say a word. He just crawls up on my lap. And because I am spiritually attuned, I figured it out. Kids need you. They need us. They need us involved in their life. And here's the thing. Don't fall for the lie that kids just need quality time. How many of you have heard, you know what kids need is quality time? And by quality time, you know that time where you're looking at them, when you're present, when you're this. But here's what's happening. We're trying to schedule 20 minutes of quality time in between this appointment and sit down our teenager and go, okay, you got 30 minutes, go. Now, how many of you know teenagers, once they hit 13, 14 years old, they stop communicating. You ask them how they're doing, all they do is grunt. Hey, man, how you doing? How was school today? It's like, I'm not getting the deepest level of communication here. And so I can't just do quality time because I don't know when his feelings or her feelings are going to bubble up to the surface. I don't know when it's going to occur to them to have a question, a deep question about faith or about life. I can't schedule that for 30 minutes a week. Do you know the average parent will spend 38 minutes per kid a week in meaningful conversation? That's not enough. So I would say to you, do quality time, absolutely, but add to it quantity time. You've got to have a lot of time with your kids. And I will say, if that means cutting out some work stuff, if that means getting home earlier, if that means just like wherever you're going to go to the store, well, just bring them with you. Like, just be with them, because the way you spell love with a kid is Time. And here's a bonus real quick for those of you who have teenagers. When they start grunting at you and they don't communicate anymore, here's what you do, okay? This is just practical. Go in at the end of the night when they're getting ready for bed, just start rubbing their back. This is so good. Just rub their back, okay? And then after about 30 seconds, go, hey, how was school today? And instead of grunting, they're going to go, well, in first period we did this, and in second period, and then this girl talked to me, and then whatever. You see, they think that we're not as smart as they are. We're way smarter, okay? But you just rub it, because they don't want you to stop doing this, right? And you just ask them, like, how you feeling about faith? How's God doing in your life? All this kind of stuff. They'll talk and talk and talk. That was bonus material right there. Let's move on. Kids need you. And here's the last one. We'll go back to Judges 13 for this because I wanted to end on this one. Judges 13:8 says, then Manoah, that's Samson's dad, then Manoah prayed to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I beg you to let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born. Now, you might expect me to say this because we're in church and I'm standing up here. But you know what your kids need? They need God. They need God. Ephesians 6:4 says, fathers, bring up your children in the training and instruction of the Lord. And guys, it's not like piano lessons. You say, what do you mean? I said, well, my wife's a piano teacher. It's not like piano lessons where you go, well, I can't learn, I don't know piano. So if my kid is going to learn, I want them to learn it, so I will subcontract that responsibility out to an expert who will teach them piano lessons. It's not like that. It's not like algebra, where I send them to their math teacher for that. You might know algebra. I don't know algebra, okay? Like, I grew up in Kentucky, and I don't know algebra, all right? As soon as they started putting letters with the numbers, I'm out. Okay, like that's too much. So I put them with an expert to teach them algebra. But you can't do that with the faith. You can't. The average church gets your kids 40 hours in a year. You get your kids 3,000 hours in a year. Who's going to have the greatest impact? And I mean, these guys are doing an incredible job. You guys built this great kids building out here. The volunteers, some of you are volunteers. You do an incredible job, but you only have them 40 hours. But mom and dad, you've got them 3,000 hours. And some of you are feeling the pressure. Dad's in the room, you're going, but I don't know how to teach them the Bible. I don't even know if it's Malachi or Malachi. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Watch this. I'm going to give you, if you care, you can. Listen to this. Right Now Media. It's like Netflix for Jesus. It's just this whole video thing. Go there, and I'm not advertising for them or anything. I don't get anything from them. But I'm just saying, like for us, we have that. And it's like they've got stuff in there about teenagers. They've got stuff in there about marriage. They've got stuff in there about the book of Ephesians. They've got hundreds and hundreds of videos. And you know what? We'll just click a video, and then afterwards, Right Now Media actually has discussion questions. And it's just like, I can push play. Or guess what? Pray at meals and at bedtime. Just simple stuff. And you go, well, I don't know if I'm going to have flowery language and do it with the these and thous the right way. And you know what? Your kids don't care. They're not even going to remember what you said. They're just going to remember the visual of when they snuck their eyes open and their mom and dad were knelt down at the side of their bed with their eyes closed, just pouring out their heart to God for their kids. That will make the difference. And you know what? Bring your kids to church, whether they feel like it or not. Hey, here's the thing. You know what question I never got asked when I was a kid? There was no adult in my life that ever looked over at me and said, hey, do you feel like going to church today? They never asked. They just said, grab your clip-on tie, we're going, okay? So don't ask your kids whether they feel like being here or not. Bring your kids to church. There are too many kids that are learning. I'm running out of time, but they said I could go. Let me tell you this story. I was on my soapbox on this for a little bit because you need to bring your kids. I was on my soapbox at our church. I came up, or after the church service, somebody came back in the green room. They said, a lady needs to talk to you about what you said. I thought, uh-oh. I come out there, and it's a lady. She's older. She's like in her 60s. And I thought, oh, man, I'm in big trouble. And she starts talking to me, and she said, yeah, about what you said about we ought to bring our kids to church, whether they feel like it or not, every Sunday. And I thought, yes, ma'am. And she says, I want you to know that a couple weeks ago, I was talking to my son who's in rehab right now, and he's 40 years old. And she said, his life is a mess, and she starts crying. And she said, I'm just so frustrated, so I just asked him, what did we do? What did we do wrong? What did we do? Like, we had you in church. We brought you up in the church. You have God. And he kind of got mad at me, she said. And he looked at her and she said, Mom, every time I had a hockey tournament on a Sunday, we went to hockey and not to church. So how important is God really in our family? And she said, David, you tell everybody to get those kids to church, no matter what. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on. I'm thinking to myself this, someday my kids are going to get a real problem. There's going to be a doctor that's going to tell them something hard. There's going to be an employer that gives them a pink slip. There's going to be a spouse that tells them something hard. They're going to go through something a little harder than getting a B- in science class. And do you know what? A soccer ball or a hockey stick ain't going to do nothing for my kids at that time. But do you know who is going to do? It's going to be God, who is always there, and Jesus, who always loves them. Any soccer coaches in the room, I apologize. But in Acts 16:34, it says, the whole family was filled with joy because they had come to believe in God. I told you that if you want to raise a giant of the faith, give them boundaries, give them purpose, give them challenges, give them time with you, and give them God.